Welcome back to a Celtic State of Mind. It's the big one. I'm Paul John Dykes, and I'm joined this evening by James McKenzie and Kevin McCluskey. And we're here on that big European night. It's Wednesday night, Celtic versus Lazio. 4 years on since we've done a double header. James, all week you've been writing furiously about this game, talking about team predictions, talking about, big stars who need to step up tonight. How are you feeling after seeing that starting 11?
Well, it's probably, of everybody that's fit and available, the strongest team we could have named. I mentioned in the bulletin earlier on that I would have liked Cameron Carter-Vickers to start, but the fact he's on the bench suggests that he's really not fit to start this game. I don't think we'll see an appearance from him either. I don't see Celtic really making many defensive substitutes unless we jump at some crazy lead heading into the latter stages. But I earmarked this game on my preview as probably the game in the group where we're most likely to take points. I don't think you're going to get Lazio in a worse state than we have got them right now. And if there's any chance to pick up points, and it would be now Atletico. I think that's them jumped up to 4 points with a win against Feyenoord and Madrid. So we could really stay in contention, jump level with Feyenoord if we can pull something out of the fire today.
Well, we've been speaking and hearing all about, Lazio coming into this game, not being on the best of forms. The gaffer has been moaning and bemoaning and everything else coming into this match, Kevin. But, you can't be led into a false sense of security. There is quality in this side. They showed it last season. It may well be that they're just not got into their stride. I know there's been quite a lot of incomings into the Lazio team. They're sitting 16th in the table. But we've got to concentrate on Celtic. We've got to concentrate on getting the points. Like James says, this is, if not the best, it's certainly one of the best opportunities for us to get points on the board in this group.
It is. Tonight's got to be all about us. We'll give Lazio the respect that they're due. We'll talk about them as the show goes on, I'm sure, because that's what we do. I'll mention just now, since we have got them, they are a quality team. They've got £27 million worth of forwards that they'd signed in the summer sitting on the bench. So that's the kind of team that we're up against. But we've got to focus on us, haven't we? And James is right. This is the game that we've got to be laying down the marker. You've got to think that we can go and take the 3 points. It's going to be really difficult there. We know they've not started the season very well, but they're still a strong team. We give them a bit of respect. But yeah, 60,000 Celtic fans in at Celtic Park, under the lights, When You'll Never Walk Alone goes on. That is a song that can break the strongest of opponents. And, tonight could just be one of those nights where you get the magic.
Let's hope it is. The starting 11, as you can see here, Hart, Johnson, Phillips, Scales and Taylor, McGregor, O'Reilly, Hatate and Yang, Maeda and Kyogo. As James was saying, Carter-Vickers makes the bench alongside Bain, Morrison, Palmer, Turnbull and Awata, Bernardo, Forrest, Ralston and Mikey. Johnson, you were talking about magic, and we've got a bit of Magic Johnston in there. Now, James, you gave your predicted 11. I've got to agree with your predicted 11. I thought that Palmer had done enough to start this game. Again, he's been pretty bold with his starting lineup because against Feyenoord, Palmer started. Tonight, it's Yang. Didn't think Yang had the best of games against Motherwell, but Rodgers has kept him in. What do you make of that?
I was surprised. As you mentioned in my team predictions, I was very much expecting Luis Palma to come into the game. I thought it was a quiet first half hour he had against Feyenoord, but after that, I thought he looked like one of the main sort of problem causers in the Celtic forward line when he was cutting inside on his right foot. The Feyenoord players were backing off him because they must have been told that he could really do something on that right foot. And I thought the Motherwell game was the game where he would stamp himself as the player that will fill in that position when Leila Bad isn't there. I mentioned it doesn't seem like Brendan Rodgers really knows whose starting right winger is. It seems like everybody's getting a fair crack. Even James Forrest had a start to try and nail down that position. And it looks like Yang's got probably the biggest opportunity of all so far to really make an impression in this team. And we will want to see being a bit less indecisive in the final third. We mentioned on the bulletin that when he's on the ball, the first sort of stages of when he's running at the man, it all looks positive. When he gets past the man, he's a bit like, right, we've done the hard part, what do I do now? He seems a bit indecisive. So if we can really drill into him to be a bit more clinical in the final third, that would be great. But it's a big game for him to prove himself. We mention all the time players sign for Celtic to play in games like this. We mentioned when Celtic are looking to sign players, we always use the lure of the Champions League as a way to get these young talents in, because it's the best proving ground on the planet for these young players to come in and really stake a name for themselves. And he could do that with a top performance. I don't think he's scored for Celtic yet. He got an assist away at Pataudry, I know that, but what a time it would be to get his first goal in a Celtic shot. But we'll be looking for a good performance for him, and if not, you've got the likes of Palma, you've got Forrest, you've got perhaps even Mikey Johnson waiting on the bench, all looking to make him.
That was you've just thrown that one right into the mix. Kevin McCluskey is shaking his head in disbelief. No, Kevin, we'll start off on the right. We'll start off on the right wing because it is maybe the surprising introduction or selection rather of Yang. So we're going to start with that. I tend to agree with James. I think that there's no doubt he's got skills. He's got a great technique. He can take on his man. I felt, and I said this earlier on in the bulletin, I felt he was a bit spooked at Fir Park because the crowd, the Motherwell crowd that is, were getting on his back. And I don't know if he's used to that, where he's coming from. But you can't forget the fact that this is a guy who was one of the best players, up-and-coming players in South Korea. He's obviously got a great technique. He's a technical player. I guess I expected for us to stick with Palmer because he made such a difference when he came on against Motherwell. What do you make of James's assertion that Yang could be one of the big players for us tonight? He's not sure.
I think he could
He's
be.
not sure. He thinks Michael Johnson could be right.
Well, I've thrown myself for that one. I was going to try and make a comeback with that with Mikey Johnson, but I'm not going to. Yang, I think he could be a player tonight. He's a player that can go either way, to be fair to him. Because the games I've seen of him so far, he looks to be really direct when he's got the ball and he wants to take his man on. And this could maybe be the night when we need somebody like that, someone that will just be prepared to take the ball and drive us up the field whenever he's got it. You've got doubts about his final ball at times because he hasn't really shown it so far, but he's got something about him that's made us go and spend a couple of million on him. He's, as he said, was really highly regarded in South Korea, being one of the young player of the year, I think, before we've signed him. Haven't seen enough of him to say I've ever been disappointed in what I've seen. I think he's a player that's got something in him. Tonight is going to be a massive, massive test for him to see what he can do. But if he can come through this, then you've got a player in your hands with him. With respect to Palma, I would probably have started him as well tonight. To be fair, I'm going to agree with both of you on that one. I thought he did enough when he came on at the weekend. Obviously, he scored what I described as that delicious goal to make it 1-0 to put us in front. I really like what I've seen of him. I was really impressed with him actually against Feyenoord. I know he took a bit of stick for that game, but I liked what I saw. You could see that he wasn't really either he wasn't fit enough or he wasn't up to speed with how we played yet. But every time he got the ball, he was direct again. He was ambitious. He was wanting to take his man on and play that ball. The goal at the weekend was him all over. He doesn't even look up. He knows exactly where he is in the park and he knows where the goal is. And that's vital when you get into that final third. So that's the thing that's missing from Yang's game, is that he's not got that instinct in him yet, that he knows his surroundings and he knows where to just deliver a ball. Palma's got that. So maybe the idea is that when you get Yang on, let him run at their defence for a bit. It's the old one, tire them out. Palma comes on and makes a big impact in the final 20, 30 minutes. As long as they win, I don't really care who makes the impact, though.
This is the thing. And, I think had the starting 11 came out and Forrest's name was on it, I wouldn't have been surprised at that. I think that Brendan Rodgers is going to utilise James Forrest this season. There's going to be games where he's maybe looking at Palma and Yang.
I would not have been surprised to see Forrest. And I would have been really happy to see Forrest actually in this kind of game because he's the experienced head. He's been there, he's done it before.
Scored the last game.
You know what you're getting for James Forrest.
Yeah, absolutely. Now, there was a comment earlier on, we were talking about the threat that we're going to be facing against Lazio tonight, it's easy to look at their league position, say they've not started well, 7 goals, 7 games, and go down that route. But anything, as we all know, can happen on a European night. And the type of team that they are, James. Now, I think that one thing that really struck me at the weekend, I'm now jumping from Lazio to Motherwell, but that's Scottish football, right? Is that Motherwell really just stepped off, and didn't play a high line against Celtic. I felt that our defence had loads of time on the ball. Motherwell allowed us to play it to a certain point and then started pressing. Lazio don't play like that, James. We're not going to have that luxury tonight because they do play a high press. That is what they do. Do you counter that by doing what we've done with Hatate against Feyenoord, like almost pin them back? Attack is the best form of defence and all that, because that is something that we will be expecting this evening from Lazio, even away from home.
Yeah, it was working as well, what you mentioned with Hatate. I thought, as much as his game was very hit and miss against Feyenoord, I felt he took a lot of the stick was a bit unnecessary. I think whenever Celtic looked like doing something through the middle of the park, it was all coming through him. But then on the other side of the coin, he was giving away the ball in some key areas, which is always going to make you shout at your telly just a wee bit more when he's losing the ball in front of the defence rather than a bit further up the park. But I'd like to see Celtic sort of deputise something like that against Lazio, just showing no fear, really sort of pushing and pressing at them, just trying to play them at their own game, because for so many years, Celtic in Europe, it's been a case of the mentality's not been there. We've looked scared, we've looked to be standing off the opponents, which could be another point that could benefit Yang, and the fact that he's willing to take on a man. He's really got a point to prove to try and stake down that place. Having someone playing with no fear could really benefit the Celtic team. But I mentioned in the bulletin how much we've seen of the mentality this season. It's looked like we've got a really strong and focused squad. I mentioned the 3 key games. I think I put it in a blog as well. The Ibrox game, everybody had written Celtic off. No one expected anything from that game. And then everybody steps up and is counted for. Livingston, you go down to 10 men, and we completely dominate that second half despite being a man down. And then the mentality to hang in there at the end at Motherwell, the heads could have easily dropped after conceding 95th minute equaliser, but they kept going and they got that winner. The mentality seems to be really strong, and you need that for Europe, where you could go an early goal down against a quality side like Lazio that can cut you open like nothing. So just being a bit more focused against a team like this will be absolutely vital.
Yeah, I mean, I'm going to bring in some of the comments, obviously, and we'll run through the team in a wee bit more detail, but the Urban Culture straight in, and I think it does fill you with confidence to see Carter Vickers on the bench. The starting lineup, with Phillips starting tonight in the Champions League, we keep saying that. It's almost like a default setting. Every time we talk about Nat Phillips coming in as an emergency centre-back signing, we talk about his Champions League experience. So I'm not really expecting any issues in terms of being caught in the headlights and all that kind of stuff. Scales has been one of the best performers of the season, in actual fact, and he's in there on merit. But I think I'd have been quite worried, Kevin, had Carter Vickers not made the bench, because what you're then looking at is a scenario whereby Phillips has just come back from injury. If anybody pulls up or anyone's having a particularly bad game, you really didn't have the options other than Iwata. I know that we've decided to pull in one of our youngsters, but you don't want to throw somebody in. I know it's happened in the past, Kev, and people might look at cite some of the examples of youngsters being thrown in and doing the business, but it's not ideal, is what I'm trying to say.
Well, it really wouldn't be for this kind of game. For every example that you give, someone can throw back in your face on the one that worked or the one that didn't if you're going the other way. But ideally, you don't want to put a young player into this kind of game. You want to bed them into domestic games, easier games, let's say. So yeah, it's great to have Carter Vickers back. I've no idea how fit he is. I don't know if he could last 45 minutes if he was asked to. I really hope he isn't asked to, because I want to see Phillips go out and Scales go out and play a commanding game. But it's great to see that he's coming back. Even if he is 60%, 70% match fit just now, you know that he's on the road back. So you know that in a couple of weeks' time he will be back in the first team, and that's a big lift for us. But yeah, looking at the back two you've got, the only issue with Phillips just now is his lack of game time.
Mm-hmm.
But other than that, you look at him and go, he's just an uncompromising centre-back who's not going to try and do anything foolish. He's just going to win the ball, he's going to get rid of it, he's going to defend and do a defender's job. So you've no issues with him coming in. He's one of those guys you'd be confident about tonight. And Scales is just, he's raised everyone's level of expectation on him over the last few weeks. He's been, as we spoke about at the weekend, the guy that was sixth or seventh choice at the start of the season, wouldn't have batted an eyelid if he left the building in the summer, and now he's a really crucial player for us, and that's testament to him. We talked about Yang needing to take his chance. Scales is the example. He's had one chance and he's absolutely grabbed it with both hands. It's now who partners Scales, not the Scales come in to partner somebody else.
That is testament to the player. But I'm going to ask you, James, how big a part do you think can be played by Brendan Rodgers in such a scenario when you've got a chap who, as Kevin said, it was almost as if we were paving his departure from the club. He had that successful spell. I know you watched him for Aberdeen a few times and you weren't that impressed by him, James, on the wrong side of a sending off and a 6-1 drubbing against Hibs. But you do tend to say, well, he's played the games on a domestic kind of level. But it was always that with a caveat of saying, but can he do it in Europe? Would you be happy going into the big European games with Liam Scales at centre-half? If you ask Celtic fans at the beginning of the season, I'm pretty sure those who are not going to be revisionists would say no, they wouldn't be confident. But we're going into this game tonight, and we're not even speaking about Scales as being a weak link because his performances have definitely stepped up. He's spoken about it as well. And, the player deserves loads of credit, but surely there's some kind of involvement in there from the man-manager, Brendan Rodgers, as well.
Yeah, I don't know what Rodgers has said. I know Scales has done some interviews with Celtic TV, which I'd probably have to take a closer look at them to see what words he has had to say about Brendan Rodgers. But I spoke about the mentality in that game at Ibrox. For him to go in there when no one's expecting anything of them, I don't know if that made the game easier or more difficult for him. But when the pressure was off, no pressure with playing with the ball at his feet, the emphasis is just on getting out of there, and he seemed to thrive on that. But even in games like when you would have a Dundee at home or something like that, he still looked good. His passing range on show was still very impressive, I thought. And in the game against Feyenoord, despite the red card, I don't think Lagerbielke was having that bad a game up until that eventual sending off. But I thought Scales probably looked the most composed out of the centre-back pair, and he looked like the £3 million signing that was signed to be a starting 11 player in the future. And he's been like a new signing when Celtic probably needed a centre-back the most. He's looked like the emergency loan signing that's had to come in and shore up the team. And I think when you're looking at the Celtic defence, I think if Celtic are going to lose tonight, it might be because of mistakes or individual errors. Firstly, because that's what cost Celtic in Europe time and time again. We've just gotten used to even a player who's had the most consistent season could all of a sudden have an absolute disaster class in a European game. It's just what happens when Celtic play on a European game. But I think Phillips' lack of match sharpness, is worrying me a bit. I think there is a real margin for error there. As much as we've spoken about his Champions League experience, you don't keep a clean sheet against Real Madrid if you're not a half-decent centre-back. But if there is going to be a cause for concern in the team, it would be the potential for a mistake from the likes of your Joe Harts and your Nat Phillipses.
The thing with Phillips, I think it's just he's not in the groove yet, is he? You've seen that with his appearances so far. He's not quite had the minutes that you would have liked. He comes in as an emergency and gets injured straight off the bat. We'll go right back to Joe Hart then. Joe Hart, 46 Champions League appearances now, Kevin McCluskey, and obviously saved a penalty against Feyenoord. That's almost been lost in the midst of the two red cards and the fact that we got beat 2-0 that night. But, this season, I think that Joe Hart has, people will disagree with this. I think in terms of his start to the season, he's been as good as he ever has been for Celtic. Potentially, for me, he's performing at his absolute best. And I think the reason for that, probably a wee bit like Scales, just do your job. So Scales can clear the ball, win a header, win a tackle, and it's not all about, right, I need to then try and play it out from the back. Sometimes it's the old John Smith and he puts the toe through it. And, I think Joe Hart has suffered in the past because we try to create attacks from the very back of the back line. And it started with Joe Hart, and it went to Carter Vickers and Starfelt. And he wasn't comfortable, Kevin. You could see it. He was not comfortable with the ball at his feet. He would hesitate. Next thing you know, he's made that mistake. And going back to the point James made about us making mistakes in Europe, I think we make the mistakes. It's just that in European competition, you're punished for them, Kevin, as well. But Joe Hart, for me, great to have him back, albeit I thought Scott Bain played his part against Motherwell, 2 decent saves. I think he's vital tonight, Joe Hart. And, he's still coming under quite a lot of criticism. I don't see it. I think that he's having a really good season for us.
I think he started the season really strong, Joe Hart. Yeah. Tonight we're going to need to call on, was it 46 games he said he played in the Champions League? We're going to have to call on all that experience tonight as well, as we will for every game in this group, because it's a tough group. And you look at the two that's in front and you go, there's an experience in Europe there. There's Phillips, who is finding his way into the team. So Joe Hart needs to be big and strong and guide those two through the games. And I think that's what he's done pretty much every game this season, because he's not had a settled back line in front of him. And in every game Joe Hart's played this season, including Livingston, where he gets sent off after half an hour, he's made a big save when it's been 0-0.
Yeah.
So in every single game he's done, he's done his job, but he's done it really well. And that was the criticism of him at times last season, was that he wasn't doing that. You look at games like, especially towards the end of the season, the Motherwell game at Celtic Park, they had one shot on goal and they scored from it. And that kind of thing was happening more and more towards the end of the season. So I think it was natural that folks were beginning to doubt him and think, is this him coming towards the end? But this season he's come back. He's just doing what a keeper should do. And probably the change in his game is helping, because he's not having to think anymore about, I need to be 30 yards from goal so that when Carter Vickers lays it back, I'm there to start this attack. He's not thinking about anything else other than minding his goal. And that's what Joe Hart is. Joe Hart's always just been a solid goalkeeper. Whenever City tried to make him a sweeper keeper, it never worked. So yeah, Joe Hart, one of those guys. Just tell him to go out and do his job and he'll do it. Hopefully that's not a famous last words, but I think tonight he's a guy that we can hopefully, rely on when called upon.
Yeah, I mean, we keep banging on about Champions League experience, and James wrote an article around the Feyenoord debutants. There was 8, albeit some of them off the bench, of course. You look at right back, Alistair Johnston, he's made 1 appearance at this level, and Greg Taylor's only made 7. Johnston's got this knack, though, James, of every single time there's a new challenge and it just kind of ups the stakes, he just steps up to it. I don't think he's looked out of place, regardless of what the challenge has been since he came to Celtic. And I mean, I'm going right back to his debut, thrown right in, baptism of fire, and he doesn't miss a beat. And I think that's vital, because we're going about experience, James. He looks as experienced as anybody on the park against Feyenoord when he made his Champions League debut. But I'm also going to say Joe Hart's come in for some stick, as has Greg Taylor. And Taylor's, for me, he's back to his usual self. Dare I say, back to his best. Do you expect that to continue tonight?
Yeah, I've been noting on the blog the last few weeks how good Greg Taylor's been. I was one of the quickest to critique him at the start of the season when he wasn't playing at his best, and I'll be one of the quickest to praise him when he is playing well. And I think that's down to what Brendan Rodgers has done. He's had him playing more of an inverted role, which has been benefiting him greatly. It's been benefiting Cal McGregor as well, having someone like Greg Taylor there to always provide an option, whether it be defensive or just a passing option. Having those two back at their best is going to be absolutely vital. I earmarked McGregor as one of the players I want to see play a bit better tonight. I didn't think he had his greatest game against Feyenoord, so we'll be looking for a bit more from him. When you touched on Alistair Johnston there, the best players at Celtic are the ones that thrive in these big occasions, because ultimately those are the games that matter the most. There wasn't much worry when Johnston came into the team for his debut at Ibrox against Rangers, because just 3 weeks earlier he'd been playing in the World Cup. He's the sort of player who thrives in these big moments, and we saw that again in his Champions League debut against Feyenoord. He was probably the strongest in our backline. Is it safe to say that? I think it is. He's got the real knack for a tackle that really earns you the adulation of the fans, and he's been a real breath of fresh air at Celtic since he's come in. There's a couple other players I want to see big performances from tonight. I want to see Rio Hatate playing well. I think when he's at his best, it makes the Celtic team infinitely better. He's got the creativity, and he's got the sort of risk-taking passes. I noted this before the game against Feyenoord. He's got the risk-taking passes that you need to cut open teams like this, that you need to provide service, to get a Maeda in behind, to get a Kyogo in behind, because it's typical of Italian teams. It's a bit stereotypical, actually, that they're always going to be organised defensively in Europe. They're always well set up. So we're going to need a couple of moments of magic from Hatate to carve open this team. And finally, I want to see a bit more from Kyogo. We need him to open his Champions League goal scoring account. I think it's been 4 or 5 games without a goal. And it was a similar amount of games before he got his first derby goal. I think it was 3 or 4 derbies before he opened his account. And what happened after he got his first goal? The floodgates opened. He's had one of the best derby scoring records in recent years. So I think we just need something similar from him in the Champions League as well. Just the one goal, and then the floodgates will open from then on.
I hope you're right, James, and I hope tonight is the night. Yeah, big opportunity, I think, for Hatate to start finding his form. McGregor to just grab the game by the scruff of the neck, as we've seen him doing so often. And as you say, the talisman, Kyogo, for him to do it at this particular level, because the more games that we play, Kev, the more people will say, you know, there's doubts and all this kind of stuff. We see the quality of Kyogo on a weekly basis. We know what he's got. And I just want him to break that duck, to ram the criticism right back down their throats. Now, Lazio's goalkeeper, obviously, is the goal-scoring Providel. He was the one that scored against Atletico Madrid, was he not, James?
Yep.
Lazari, he's a
minute goal, I think, was it not?
I know, we like a 95th minute winner. Or that was an equaliser in his case.
97-minute ones are the ones that we like.
Yes. Hey, I'll take one tonight. Romagnoli and Patrick is the 2 centre halves, with Luis Alberto, Vicino and Kamada in the middle, and Zaccagni, Immobile and Anderson up top. We all know about Immobile. You were writing about him earlier on today, James, talking about the fact that, yeah, he's this prolific striker. You know, rewind 4 years ago, we were talking about him going into those 2 Lazio games. He's a dangerous, dangerous striker. And I know that he had some injury problems last season. So if you look at his numbers, they're maybe not up there as vintage performances from him. But that's a striker that we really do need to be wary of. Now, Paul reckons that Lazio are a better team than Feyenoord. Well, you know, I think we're in a very tough group. I think every single point that we get will be a prisoner. But tonight, as James quite rightly said, I think tonight is a really good opportunity for us to get a win. Jerry Doorstop. Have I mentioned that I was at the game with Andrew Innes the last time round at Celtic Park? Maybe once or twice. Yes, one of my favourite bands of all time, Primal Scream. Andrew Innes was at that game. And it was a surreal moment, celebrating the winner by just jumping about like a lunatic with the guitarist from Primal Scream. Yeah, hopefully he's tuning in to the game tonight. And John Sweeney, I'd rather we took our time with Carter Vickers and not rush him back, and we will need him for the Hearts and Hibs away games. Yeah, you certainly don't want him to pull up too soon when he comes back into the team. Bob, let's go into this game. Eyes wide open, and note that the mighty Lazio are 16th in their league. Yeah, they are. But in terms of that, Kevin, and we can talk about one-off games and form going out the window and lack of experience and us making the same mistakes again. I don't think we're going to be doing that under Brendan Rodgers this time round. I think there's going to be periods of tonight's game that people might say nothing much is happening, but that will suit Brendan. I think his game plan is to soak it up, stop them from operating, and then in the second half, we might come into our own. I won't be concerned if we're not creating chance after chance after chance, as we got used to doing under Ange Postecoglou.
Yeah, you're playing against an Italian side who, you know, I think James mentioned it, you know, the stereotypical view of Italian teams is that they're well organised and stubborn and stodgy at the back and you can't break them down. Sarri's teams are a little bit different because I think they like to press a bit higher up the field. They maybe will leave space in behind. But yeah, the way Rodgers plays, he's not going to go hell for leather in this game, I don't think. I'd been super critical of him before in his first time at the club when I thought he maybe was a bit naive with how he played the games in Europe when he was trying to play the same way against Barcelona and PSG as he was against Partick Thistle. I think he's a different manager now. He's had his run in Europe with Leicester where he got into a semi-final. He knows how to play these games. I think it could be one of those games that might not be one for the purists at times. There might be times when it's dull and boring and nothing happens and the game gets lost in the midfield, but that could suit us. because I think the longer the game goes on, we'll grow into it. The game plan will start to work. We'll look at the bench and you'll go, somebody like Palmer could come on, Forrest with the experience, to offer something different up front. Yeah, I've got right now, right, I've talked myself back into having the confidence again that we can go and take this game to Lazio and give them a game. It won't be easy. Doesn't matter that they're 16th in the league. They're a strong team. As I'd said before, £27 million worth of summer signings on the bench up front. That's what you're up against. But it's Celtic. It's Celtic Park underneath the lights on a big European night. We've had these special nights in the past, and this can just be another one. And if it is, it gives us a decent chance, actually, confidence that you can get a third place in this group. So this is a massive game. Brendan knows that, and he'll have a game plan designed to get us the win.
Brilliant. I love the positivity I'm getting from you here tonight, Kevin. Let's go to the action. Celtic versus Lazio is our first home game in the Champions League since Brendan Rodgers came back to the club. Thank you, every single one of you, for getting involved in the chat. And thank you to James McKenzie and Kevin McCluskey. Join us at halftime for our analysis of that first half. And thank you for joining us on A Celtic State of Mind.